Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move. This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming back. Choices Not Chances. Man, we got a good one for you today. Today we have a guest with a story that has not been expressed on this show to date. To tell the story correctly, though, we have to go back to 2010. I was in Marjah with my guys and the fight was raging on. We had received word that we would soon have a key leaders on deck from 2-9 and the rip tow would commence. A rip tow is a relief in place transition of authority. And generally what happens is we have some incoming unit send some of their key leaders out. They go out with us who have been there for a while, and then their main element comes in, ours goes out. Our key element stays back, runs some patrols with them, some familiarity patrols with the AO, with their guys, and then ultimately my guy, myself and the other key leaders will leave, and 2-9 will take the authority. And so that's what we had going on. At the same time, though, 1-6, who was just south of us, will be conducting their RIP as well. The new squad leaders and team leaders and key elements from 2-6 Echo Company fell in and were set to conduct right seat patrols with 1-6. The news came to me as I was picketing the main supply route into northern Marjah. The command team had showed up. They brought food and chow, and they brought news. News letting us know that the fight wasn't over and to stay frosty. They let us know that one of the RIP patrols for 1-6 got hit and 2 of the incoming squad leaders were killed. I remember thinking what it would be like to not even have the main element in and you're already using the succession of command, and what it would be like to be that APL or that team leader that's going to assume command. We conducted our RIP tow and left Afghanistan, but I'd always thought about the way the 2-6 team leader assumed command. Today we have Stuart Blackwell on the show. He was the 2-9 team leader who assumed command for the push into Marjah. We have the pleasure of picking his mind about not only that experience, but his life experience and his experiences thereafter. Stu Blackwell, welcome to the show. Stu Blackwell, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It's good to be here, brother.
Yeah, so talking in the monologue, you're the first guest that I've had on my show to assume a squad through succession of command. And so I want to dive into that. But first, I ask some pointed questions to my guests coming up. More for understanding leadership, where leaders come from, and how that works. And your family has pretty impeccable line of leaders in it. So I want to understand more of that. I know I was able to meet your brother, who received the Hubert Award Trophy for being a best gunner or notable, and got pictures with him at the Ground Award ceremony. And so you have a lineage, let's say, or a bloodline of leaders. And I want to know what that early life starts looking like parents in the house, religion, siblings. So we'll just kind of start there. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in roundabouts Memphis, Tennessee area. My brother you've already mentioned him. He's somewhat of the trailblazer. So going back a little bit, my grandfather, my father's father on his side, actually, he served in the Navy during Korea on the USS Wisconsin.
Okay.
He never spoke about it, and he passed when I was young-ish. I want to say around 11 to 13 range or so. So we never really got into that. But my father did not serve. And then my brother was somewhat of the trailblazer, so he graduated high school, and obviously I idolized him growing up. I also had an older sister, so I'm the baby of the family. And we were raised in, I wouldn't say a strict Christian home, but a a home where everybody knew what the core values of the family were. They were based on the word of God. They were based on in that religion. Um, and my parents loved us. They've been married for well over 30 years now, which is a rarity these days, sad to say, but true. So I had a very good childhood. I did. My parents showed us by example what it was to work hard for everything that you want. And that example has shaped me and both of my siblings significantly. You know, so Phil, as you mentioned, he was the first Marine in the family. He graduated high school and went on to play college ball at a small university called Lambeth, which is in Jackson, Mississippi. Is no longer a private institution. So I guess that kind of makes him sound like a fossil a bit. But yeah, he joined after that. He started out as a reservist with Kilo 323 and then went to Iraq for their first deployment. And about that time, I had enlisted out of high school in 2007 and ended up at 2-6 for my first unit. And that was the first time that I got to see him together when we were both Marines, which is pretty rad. He was coming back from his first combat pump, and I was a fresh-faced boot. Didn't know anything at all about anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know little bit different. My little brother was in the National Guard, and he did like air security. He fired like missiles from a truck after counter battery would identify it, kind of thing. And so he did a pump over to Afghanistan though a few years back, and before he got out, and when he came home, it was cool. It was rad to go there and be at his homecoming. And I was used to people coming to my homecomings, and then I got to go and experience that and share that with my little brother Lucas, and so then it's just like this different bond. Like now kind of a bond, and so that's super rad. But let's go back. What was growing up like in Mississippi? What was did you play team sports and things of that nature?
Oh yeah. So I dabbled like most kids do when they're in those early phases, figuring out what you like and stuff. And baseball was kind of cool and everything, but didn't really stick with it. And then me and my brother discovered contact sports, and that was that was it. It's like, really? You mean I can run around on this field and I can hit people, or I can go on this slam people and stuff? I'm like, yeah. So he stuck with football, and that was my thing for a little bit up until I want to say about sophomore year of high school, and then I discovered wrestling, and that was my clear path. So that's where I kind of diverged from him a little bit, and that sport has been a significant aspect of my life ever since, and still is today.
Yeah, man, it's always nice to go and just rough each other up out on the mat somewhere, and then knowing and learning at a young age how to control people, and especially people that don't want you to control them. I wrestled too. I dabbled a little bit in high school, but when I got out, I did some jiu-jitsu, and still love it to this day. I don't do it as much as I should, but it's awesome. And then okay, so I guess let's kick forward. We've already kind of talked about the path your brother took. You're gonna play some wrestling. You're gonna do some football. You're gonna graduate, and you're gonna end up in 2-6 Echo Company. Yep. Now, anything notable to talk about from boot camp?
So boot camp is like it's the common experience, and that's why it's the first thing that's usually pushed out there. Not just because chronologically it's the first thing we all go through. Sure. I think the main thing to note for me is, while that was at the time, like, that seemed like the mountaintop, it was great, actually getting through that. The first thing that I'll say is what got me through it was, we mentioned parenting and the environment that I grew up in. Like, my parents were not abusive or oppressive or anything like that, but they held us to a standard. Loved us, they cared for us, they provided for us, but they also expected us to behave properly, and they expected us to do what was right, and they taught us those things through example. So when I show up to recruit training, and it sucks because it's supposed to suck, there's, grown men crying themselves to sleep for the few hours of sleep that you get at night. And I'm not one of those dudes. I'm like, okay, I got it, Dad. I may have hated it at the time, but I get it now. Thank you. I wrote home, as much as it must have rubbed Mom the wrong way, was to Dad to say thank you for actually, quote unquote, being hard on me. Actually, he was just teaching me how to be a man. It really did pay dividends. The second thing that I would say is, kind of in the vein of where we started, that seems like the pinnacle, but as an infantryman, and what I've found is this is a common, among all of us, that's the easiest part of it all.
Yep.
You get through recruit training, and you're super proud that you're a Marine now, and you should be. Nothing should take away from that. But once you go to SOI and you shift gears from haircuts and boot bands and basic conduct as a Marine to very macro, locate, close with, and destroy, it changes the game entirely. There's a deeper meaning to it after that. So it starts things, but it is definitely not the end all be all, and it's not the pinnacle of the overall military experience if you're an infantryman.
Yeah, if you're an infantryman is the key the key note at the end of that, because I talk to a lot of veterans, right? Not always on this show, but that's my whole vein, that's my whole platform is to speak to vets, make the transitioning ones better, and to speak to active duty guys and make them more lethal, more savage, any way that we can. And when I talk to vets that are not Marines, they have still got very fond and impactful, impressionable experiences in boot camp that always come out. And it's like, it's just interesting to me, because then when I talk to infantry guys, they all say the same thing. Hey, yeah, dude, I don't really have anything from boot camp. Like it was a thing that I had to get through to get to where I wanted to be. And where I got there was way more impactful, impressionable memories that came from there that just pale in the comparison to yellow footprints and DIs. And as much as I agree with you, that is the foundation, that is the building blocks start there. Like we have to understand discipline, we have to understand close order, and it starts there. But like you said, I would echo the same thing. It was just a thing. It was a thing that got me to where the real game started. So okay, so nothing impressionable there. So you can go to SOI, you get some good training over at SOI, learning how to be an infantryman, and you land in 2-6. Now, walk me through. You came in 07. So you get to SOI, you get all that done. Is it the end of 07 or are we into 08 now?
No, end of 07. So
end of 07. Okay.
By December, I was showing up to 2-6. So I got everything done in that last half of the year, and I was at my operational unit before Christmas of 07.
Check.
Yeah.
And so walk me through that dropping off and come into 2-6 and what that experience is like for the people that don't know, especially if it's a Thursday.
No, actually it was a Friday.
I don't know if that's better or worse.
Debatable. It depends. Luckily, I'm trying to remember. There may have been some sort of holiday or some sort of event or something like that, but it was not the typical barracks block party.
Okay.
It got a little bit lucky in that regard, but there were still some remnants hanging around. I mean, obviously, everybody knows that there's a boot drop coming.
Yeah.
But these guys, they are fresh off of a Fallujah deployment, and I had no idea what to expect at all. SOI was not a cruise for me. I struggled physically. I struggled mentally. And in a lot of aspects, I kind of feel like, if I hadn't made the necessary internal changes, then I wouldn't have graduated that school, but it forced me to that critical point. So when I got to 2-6, it was like, yeah, I made it past one more thing. And then that just went away. Like there was it didn't sustain my confidence or anything. Because now I'm actually stepping in front of combat veterans.
Yep. That
Fallujah is still a hot name at this point in time. It's only 07. So, Ramadi's still ongoing, I believe, at this point. Could be wrong about that. But it was a little frightening. And, I remember they they dropped us off, and we went to the company office for a little bit, did all our admin and all that kind of stuff, grabbed all of our shit, stepped out. Several hours later, it was nightfall at this point, and you could see little pockets of people on the catwalk. There was all sorts of alcoholic beverages everywhere being consumed and hurled in various directions. You know, and someone just took up the call the second that we stepped out. They're like, fucking boots on deck. Yeah, there's no secret now.
Cat's out of the bag.
Right. And you hear horror stories and you expect it to be like this terrible, terrible thing where you just get fucked with all night. But man, like, what I'll say about my overall boot experience and what I learned immediately when I got on deck was, if I didn't do anything wrong, nobody was going to fuck with me. Like,
there's enough people doing wrong shit.
Right. Like, you're going to be treated like a man. And if you just do what you're supposed to do, if you learn and progress and get better and you're actually an asset to everybody else, then you're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I met my team leader the following day. He wasn't there that night. And that's exactly what he told me. He pulled me away from the barracks, away from everybody else, just me and him. There was no uniforms involved. There was no formality. And he was just like, hey man, two things, essentially act like a man and I'm going to treat you like a man, and don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And that was the theme for me, being a boot. There was a lot expected of us, and it kind of, you don't realize how much you don't know until you're put in front of somebody that knows a lot. And it can be a very humbling experience. So that was also a main theme. There was never a point in time where I was like, oh yeah, man, like I've got this. And I felt like I could just, take it easy. There was always some way to improve, like always.
And I think that's a great personality to have, and a great mindset to have, especially as a junior Marine or as a boot coming in. And you guys that are coming in, if you're junior Marines, you should take that up, and even you senior Marines, because if we are not always a student of the game or a student of what we're passionate about, you should always be a student. There's too much stuff to know. There's too many things, too many little vignettes and little side things to your job. You will never know it all. You never know it all. You'll never know you never know anything. That's where I've kind of gotten to as an adult. There's just too much. You always have to be a student. You always have to take it in, read, pick the minds of your seniors, pick the minds of the people who are above you in whatever passion you have. Always be a forever student. Anyway, sorry to cut you off. I just want to throw that in because that's not a mindset I see very much. Either when I'm talking to guys or when I'm talking to junior Marines or I see them, it's like that's the exact mindset you need to have, is that you could never learn enough. Like there's always more. So,
Well, I had the benefit of, my older brother being around too, so I could offer him, and, like my experience thus far and pretty much the entire time that I was in was relatively bullshit free on that regard. Like my recruiter couldn't pull one over on me because my brother was the entire time.
Yeah.
There the entire time. Like, so I dodged that bullet as well. And anytime that I needed advice, I could go to him about it. Yes, he was an NCO, but at the same time, he's also my brother. So that's a different relationship dynamic. He's going to tell me straight and he's going to be honest with me, but he's going to have a little bit of a, hey, I give a shit about you.
Right.
Touch to it.
Yeah. He's got that. He's got a brother bias in the game. So he's going to be real. He's going to tell you, hey, dude, this is what's going on, but look out for this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. That's a great asset to have, especially when you got, a brother that's locked on, squared away and doing the right thing. Go ahead.
The mentality that you were talking about, it didn't start out that way 100%. At first, like it was just simply like I was a robot, go here, just try and learn as much as you can. And then once I actually started to figure that out, it progressed a little bit. So like learning primarily came from, team leaders, and, I rarely saw my squad leader as a boot, aloof, doing his own thing. But the other team leaders and stuff, that's where a lot of the learning occurred. When it came to the academic side of the house, when it came to like reading and studying and doing all that, that didn't gel for me until much later on. And I often think about how much easier I could have made things on myself, or well, not really easier, but like how I could have facilitated the learning process a little bit better had I latched on to research and
Sure.
reading on my earlier. Because
Sure.
it's a huge part of development. Huge part.
You know, the thing is, like, the thing is, at the time in 07, the op tempo is crazy. There's crazy things going on. You're a boot and you're told, hey, you need to learn all of this, exactly what the fuck I tell you, and there's no time to fuck around. And we're going to war, so get your war face on. And when you're told that, like, you're not thinking, let's go get On Combat by Dave Grossman and just really dive into it. However, that's something you should have been told too. You know, you should have been told that. And like, you don't have an excuse now. There's too many people doing these podcasts. There's too many people running this information out in front of you to have the excuse of, oh, I didn't know. You know, it's out there now. Now it's a matter of discipline. Do you have the discipline to, instead of going out and drinking with the boys and partying, to go home and knock 100 pages out and understand 100 pages? And for me, it's the same story as you. I didn't have anybody. We didn't have this. We had high op tempo, people telling us shut the fuck up and train. And that's an excuse. That's only an excuse, and it's on me, and it's on you, and it's on all of us. That's an excuse, but it's a decent excuse. There's not very many decent excuses out there with this much info and popularized podcasts that are pushing information out in front of us. But here we are telling you, because I had the same story that didn't develop until later in my career. Like
Right.
halfway, more than halfway through it, I'm like, oh, there's so much power in this. And understanding your enemy, understanding the land that you're going to. And that's just something I aim to lessen the age of. If we can take it down to first term, if in your first term you can figure this out, it would be great. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, so now, when you fall in on these team leaders and you're in 2-6 here and you're doing the training, you say you very rarely see your squad leader. Are these the guys you're deploying with?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so this is the group.
Yep. This is the group. Now, squad leader, platoon sergeant, that kind of that changed hands a lot and stuff. Our team leaders stayed largely the same.
Check.
Now they moved around and stuff within the platoon, but we got there right as everything was like being formed, you know? So at first there was like 8 team leaders and then the boot drops and that's it, you know? And then over time it became more whole and it actually looked like a coherent unit.
Yeah.
But
which that's pretty general. That's generally how it goes, right? You come back from a deployment, especially if it's a raunchy one. You have a bunch of NCOs exfil. Your junior guys are going to stand up, and then generally you're going to pull some NCOs that are needed, maybe from other places, and you're bringing them in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were at the time we were hoping for an Iraq deployment, obviously, but it's did not end up going that way, and I have no idea what the exact reason is for that. I assume that some of that had to do with our command. They were, and this is not. I'm not one of those dudes that usually goes on the witch hunt, and this changes too. That's why it's important to note now. The Iraq command element that they had, they obviously went away. They went on to do other bigger and better things, you know, top notch from what we were all told by our team leaders and stuff, which is rare in that era, as I understand, when it's very common for, you know, people to just look up the chain of command and bitch about the next guy.
Yeah.
Everyone was real respectful of them, but when they left, we got a new group in and they were not so hot.
Not the same.
Yeah. So we ended up going on a MU and it was very disappointing at the time. Little did I know that after our second deployment, I would be very grateful that we had those extra 7 months to learn from those combat vets. And I often think about how much worse Marjah would have been had we not had that time. So it's funny in the moment, you know, you look at these things and you're like, what the fuck? This is not what I signed up for, you know, but you shut up, you do your duty, you work hard, you develop as best you can. And then later on down the road, it pans out and you're like, got it. You know, so if you notice the pattern, it's like that in recruit training with dad, and then it's like that with the general flow of events. It's just kind of how it, you know.
Blessings. You don't think they are at the time, but they are.
In disguise, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, anything notable from the MEU? I always ask because, like, I got to the end of my career and I never did one, and then I found myself, I don't know about wanting, but wondering. Like, I got to do a lot of stuff. I got to do all of the, rad stuff, but I didn't do a triple canopy jungle patrol or exercise and watch it black out at night. I didn't get that experience. I didn't get, some of the guys have great stories from the training, from Australia, from just different areas, and I missed that. So I'm assuming you got a little piece of that.
Yeah. So the first MEU that I went on, and I had two all total. It's kind of like bookends for the career, but this first one was we got to see a lot of cool places, man. And it seems kind of small to note this, but it would cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of probably like 20 grand for me to take my family and go see all the places that I saw. I was 19 to 20 years old on this deployment, and I'm getting paid to go see Greece, France, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, like all these places that most people would kill to go to and don't get to go to in their entire life.
Yeah.
So that's pretty rad. As far as the training and everything goes, and this is where this is really the main thing that I took away. Obviously, combat's its own separate thing, okay? But when you're training with people in an infantry environment where the margin for error is so little due to the consequences and the potential consequences for failure. Okay, you're talking about somebody's life here. It's not losing a job or losing a football game or blowing a big sale or something like that. Like, if somebody messes up in this type of environment when it counts, you're probably looking at a 5-year-old little girl and telling her, hey, you don't have a dad because I didn't do my fucking job.
And oh, by the way, he was your best friend.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you have to live with that. That family has to live with that. Nobody wants that. Yeah. Right. So yes, it's a harsh environment. We don't shy away from correcting people at all. And we do it in public as well, because chances are if one person fucks it up, somebody else did, and it just didn't get caught, or they would in the future.
Fact.
So you get the information out to everybody. It's not because we're trying to be assholes. It's just, it's all about the team. All right. Mm-hmm. Personal views, your personal feelings, like none of that means anything. You're either an asset to the team or you're a liability to the team, and when you're in that environment for a significant period of time, and development, internal development, right? Not just physical development, but your mental development, your spiritual development, and how you fit into the whole pie. That it changes you. It has a profound effect on you, how you carry yourself, how you move forward in life, and how you view that experience. And that's one of the things that I really missed the most. I miss being in that culture where everything was merit-based, like literally everything, and there was no hiding who you truly were on the inside. You could suppress it and cover it for a little bit every now and then, but eventually everybody's true colors are fleshed out for all the world to see. There's no hiding permanently. There's a completely different value system than American society. It is a different value system than the rest of the services and the other MOSs. It is unique, and it has to be, because of those consequences that we just talked about, and because of the fact that in our war, which at this point in time is about like halfway through or so, right? Yeah, 07.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah. Okay. So
7, 10, and then we're done in 21, about halfway.
Yeah. So it's not a secret. We all know where eventually we're supposed to end up going. But yeah, man, that it has a significant and profound effect. I kind of lost track of where I was going with that last one.
No, you're just talking about the differences between a training environment and then what was to come. So when you were on your MEUs, especially your first one, you had great training, but you cannot replicate the environment on your resilience, your emotion, your spirituality that you find on the battlefield. It's a fact. Yeah.
Training, the best training in the world is only going to get you so far. But I do think that the environment that you train in has a significant impact on being able to carry it that last little bit.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
And we were fortunate enough to have team leaders that may have hated the Marine Corps, but they didn't want anything bad to happen to us. They didn't want that on their conscience.
Yeah.
You know? So they trained us to the best of their ability, and we benefited from that greatly. And yeah, that's really what the Mew kind of drove home to me, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a great thing. And I would say, you said these team leaders came straight out of Fallujah.
Yep.
Fresh out of Fallujah. And I never looked at training the way I should have looked at training until I was in Marjah. And I did an Iraq deployment before that, you know, and we were never tested there. And so I didn't have that burning sensation of train or die. But when I came back from Marjah, I was a different person. When I came out of that, all I cared about was training. You never had enough time to train. There's not enough. You have to be better. You have to be perfect. And I would assume that some of your team leaders had that mentality coming out of Fallujah deployment, coming out of a real deployment, where things aren't always good. Yeah.
Well, some of them did and some of them didn't, you know, and this, just to be clear here, this was
it's not Fallujah 1, but these guys are over in Iraq. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so I don't know exactly what their deployment was like. But you could tell there were definitely ones that valued it a whole lot more than others did. You know, some were just get out and move on. But even those guys, when it actually came time to execute something and do something, like, they were there.
Yeah.
You know, and if you had questions or something like that, they would answer them.
Yeah.
You know, they may be nice about it, but they're going to give you everything that you need. And then there were the other ones that were just, you know, a little bit, they were a cut above, and they were driving the training, and they were making sure that we were where we were supposed to be, and we were using our time as effectively as we possibly could, you know?
Sure.
So.
Well, that's great, and that's going to pay dividends later, because if you had some of the guys just wanted to lay up, drop the pack, say this is my last deployment and it's a Mew and I don't give a fuck, well, all that does is hurt your junior Marines, get bad habits started, and then, you know, they're going to find themselves in a situation in the Wild West and not have the training that they need.
Moreover, and I wonder this too, I haven't spoken to those guys, but I think about, you know, one of the few things that I do have is I'm proud of the way that I left the service. You know, that's its own thing, you know, because I had seen the opposite so many times. You know, I wonder how they feel about that. You know, I wonder how they look at the way that they acted and that mentality on their way out the door. And I wonder if that bothers them.
Now, what do you mean? What kind of, how did they act?
Like, so the few that wanted to drop their packs and stuff, and this is not necessarily just a my senior specific thing. I saw the single unit that I went to, that was the typical thing. Once somebody makes that decision, they're just like, you know what? I'm done with this. I don't want anything to do with it at all. Just get me out of here as quickly as possible, you know? And I wonder what it's like having to live with that, having to look back on that and be like, wow, man, I probably could have, you know, at least contributed something on my way out the door.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that would be a person-to-person kind of a thing. And, you know, remember, there's a lot of people that got disenfranchised in that war, disenfranchised from the military, from the Marine Corps, from the U.S. government, and maybe even more now than then. So I don't know how they would feel about it. You know, I would expect that. Here's one thing I say. I said this on another podcast that I was a guest on, but I would say, if you ever did anything unbecoming, I think you feel it now. If you ever did anything dishonorable, I think you feel it now. But like, if you just let yourself down and you didn't grow to your full potential as a human being and as a Marine leader or as an Army leader, like, one day you're going to meet yourself, and that's true hell. True hell is when you meet the person you were supposed to become. When God says right there, that's what you had the chance at. That's what you could have done, and he didn't do that. And when you are in situations where that is the answer and you didn't give everything you could give, and that's not just to your Marine career or to your soldiering, that's to everything in your life. You get to the point, you get to the end, and you look and said you could have done all these things and you didn't do those things. I can't imagine what that would feel like, and I don't want to. I don't want to know what that's like. I want to give it all until it's done. Anyway, that's a good question. I don't know. I think those people will do soul searching one day, especially the ones that did things dishonorable, even if they didn't get caught. They'll think about that forever. Yeah, what torture. So, bring me home from the MEU. Talk to me about transition. Talk to me about moving up in the billets, you know, and then prepping for your next go round.
Okay, so this is when everything just kind of started to change, you know. So we got home, and it's just like you said, like the process just kind of started over. All of our seniors left, you know, essentially. There was maybe like 3 or 4 of them that stuck around. Okay, there was not. Most of them, it was just a mass exodus. So they formed their own platoon, and the command just kind of let them be over there.
Star platoon, yeah?
Yeah, there was a
short
lot
timers against reenlistment.
Right? So they kind of wanted that away
Yeah.
from us, you know? And that's not to say, like, they were terrible dudes or anything. A lot of them were just ready to get out, you know?
Yeah.
And we could still go to them and get advice. And some of them were still around for like when we were training, because guess what? We were the team leaders now, you know, and that was a big deal to us, you know, like team leaders made the whole fucking world go round, man. Like that was the deal. Squad leaders, yeah, like they had a part to play in that as well. But above that, it was just like, all right, like I've got a platoon sergeant. I know his name. I couldn't tell you what he looks like, you know. And my platoon commander's up doing Navy things somewhere up there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the team leaders made the world go round, man, and the squad leaders were there to kind of like reinforce that. And so, being chosen to be a team leader when you come back, because there weren't enough spots for all of us. We had a massive boot drop. You know, it's like 75% boots in our platoon.
Yep.
So I was going to be able to be a team leader. Getting that nod was a huge ego boost at the time.
Sure.
You know, I felt like, again, I was on that mountaintop, not realizing that, you know, the clouds were just covering that summit. Recurring theme here, you know?
Yeah.
But so we're standing in formation one day, and they're finally getting everything settled and all that. Our new platoon sergeant comes out, and he calls off the names and our billets and everything like that. And so I got moved back from first squad to second squad in the formation, but I was a first team leader. I was an APL, you know. So thing happened to my squad leader, who I didn't know who it was at the time. I was going to be the dude to take that on. So it was like a double ego boost. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so out of nowhere, my squad leader shows up, a man by the name of Zach Walters, and he had been in 3rd platoon on this last MEU. So I kind of knew who he was, but he polar opposite of my squad leader. All right. So my squad leader was the big, burly, like sledgehammer type of dude, you know. You get drunk in a libo port and do something stupid, he's going to beat the shit out of you and throw you around and all that kind of stuff, right? Zach was not that kind of dude. Now, I would come to find out that he had subtle ways of making you feel pain when you needed it. But, yeah, so I was skeptical, to say the least, all right? But the first thing this dude does, right, is he walks straight down the line from me to every single man in the squad, all 3 team leaders, and every boot that we have as well, introduces himself, shakes our hand, and tells us it's going to be a pleasure working with him. And I was like, wait, that just happened? I mean, this dude just shit and work harder and then go disappear somewhere? Like, interesting. All right. So that kicked things off. And then the workup as we moved into this, it was like the entire unit underwent this massive shift, you know. So I mentioned that our command element was not too hot on the MEU. That changed almost overnight. We got Sergeant Major Fry in as our battalion sergeant major, and at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Ellison. He's now a brigadier general. Yeah, we won't go any more with that. But so that was our team, and it started from the top down. Pretty soon, just personnel that were getting moved around. Like they painted the giant 2-6 World War I Bella Wood battle mural on the wall. So that every single time you go into the company office, you see that, and you're like, wow, like people actually take pride in this place. To look cleaner. It started to run cleaner when people needed to get things done. It didn't take forever. The operation got a lot smoother, and that freed us up to focus on what we should have been doing all along, which is a whole lot more training. And furthermore, the onus was on the squad leaders and the fire team leaders to make that happen. If you were one of those dudes that was dependent on someone higher than you to tell you how to train or what to do, you weren't going to be in a leadership billet for too long. Right. They were going to get somebody else that could do that. And Zach took that expectation and he ran with it. So he drove training not based off of, like a, hey, if you fuck this up, you're going to feel pain type of thing. It was more of a, hey, it was a smart, measured approach and creativity. Okay. Creativity was really at the heart of it all. It's, yes, we have all these concepts from this book or from what you were taught on the MEU. All right. Sure. But how do we take that and how do we mold it to a whole bunch of different situations in order to win? You're at point A, you got to get to point B. I don't give a fuck how you get there as long as you get there. And he never outright said it, but like implicitly he demanded that of us. He demanded that our brains be working overtime to try and come up with creative solutions to problems, and to exercise initiative as well. He would rather us go full speed on our own and make a mistake and then correct the mistake on the back end from an education point, than to just freeze or be totally reliant on him. He wasn't having, so completely different environment than I was used to. And he understood each and every single one of us in the squad. He understood what our strengths and weaknesses were and how to employ us appropriately. He understood how different we all were. And he kind of acted as the glue. He was the piece that held everything together, Yep. Essentially what's going on here from a very zoomed out perspective is all of us are in an environment where, different though I may be from team leader 2 and team leader 3, all of our strengths are put into positions where they can shine
and complement one another.
Yes. And our weaknesses are being improved behind the scenes.
Yep.
So the ball's moving forward inch by inch by inch by inch by inch. And yeah, man, it was a longer workup. I want to say it was about 10 months or so.
You were working up for a MEU?
No, on the back end of the MEU.
No, I know, but were they originally working up for a MEU on the back end, or did they know from the beginning they were going into Marjah?
Well, not Marjah. Marjah was
Afghanistan.
Or just held under wraps, if you will. We pretty sure though, just based off of how different everything was, like, this is not going to be a bullshit deployment here. No, that. And the closer that we got, we actually started seeing things posted up in the barracks, right by the duty huts and stuff like that, like Operation Mushtarak. And you guys, what y'all are doing, little time, but it was almost like they knew about it and they just waited for a little bit, but they were introducing these measures to help get our minds in the right place. Get your minds
right.
Yeah. Yep. And knowing Sergeant Major Fry and Lieutenant Colonel at the time, Ellison, that's doesn't surprise me at all if that's how it went down. But yeah, man, so we had about 10 months or so to gestate in that type of environment, to learn and to get a whole lot better. And to get a whole lot tougher as well. PT got a whole lot harder, but a whole lot more interesting. There was a lot of fighting involved, a lot more fighting. Zach was real big on just like raw physical aggression. Care how big you were. He just wanted to see what kind of it'd be. That was really it.
Yeah, man.
And so it wasn't the same old anymore. There was actual critical thought put into everything that we did. And the training that we did was more inclusive not based on people's feelings, but based on people's abilities and stuff, you know? So we
Sure.
had a fact team leader, and that's where Zach came from before the MEU. And they had critical skills when it came to close quarters battle that the rest of us did not have. You know, took what we had learned in Mount, you know, like block 3, just straight destroy everything, and what they had learned in a non-permissive environment like CQB or, you know, advanced urban combat was the school they went to, and we found ways to mend them together and made our own like bastardized version of the stuff,
Sure.
right? Which takes hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and days in order to do, you know?
For sure.
And really, like, that time together, just working through things and figuring it out was awesome, because it wasn't a bad environment, you know? When we were done, like on the few days that we were actually back in the rear, we weren't out training because field time was plentiful on this workup. You know, we would go out together as a squad, you know, and our conversations over steaks and whiskey sours at dinner and stuff was, you know, hey man, like, should we all like chip in and get the entire squad this piece of gear? How could we use that in X formation and this and that? Like, work
That's
was
great.
not, you know, it was fucking awesome because we created it. Everybody had a stake in it, you know? And that's a very rare thing to say that you've experienced, I think, in any walk of life. Most people just hate their jobs and they do it because, well, I need things. I have mouths to feed. I have a mortgage to pay, you know, whatever. We didn't have that. And like, we were all in a place where we legitimately loved what we were doing, and we really liked working with each other.
Yeah.
You know, started to rub off on each other. So that was a damn good workup because of that, you know. And I have very fond memories of both on duty and in the field and off duty with the squad, and there was just nothing quite like it. You know, it was a great time, brother. It really was.
Best job I ever had. Yeah, man, that's awesome, and that's going to be a lethal squad. When you have a squad eat together, dine together, talk together, live together, shit together, bleed together, that squad's going to be so tight when they get there, and when they get up out of there, that that's a forever bond. That's the brotherhood. That's the brotherhood that you hear so much about. When you come up out of that, after building that, progressing through your workup, bonding, molding, melding, and then going and doing work. Amazing. Yep. So at what point do you know for sure what you're doing?
It was fairly late in the deployment. I can't remember exactly when, but I want to say like that last quarter of the workup. That's kind of when the work is like, hey, it is Afghanistan. We just didn't know exactly where, right. You know. And for some reason, I'm drawing a blank on that, man. I guess like because to us, we always assumed, you know, and told us it wasn't a big deal. It was like you're telling me something that I already know. Like, are you going to point to a spot on the map? Because that would be cool, but if not.
Yeah, because you had a couple of things going on. It wasn't just Marjah. You had Sangan going on. You had a couple of other places that were fiery. So you could have ended up. It didn't have to be there. You didn't. You know. So. No,
it didn't. And another thing too, man. Like this was 2010. Like Iraq was like the embers on the Iraq fire were still a little bit hot. They were out, but like Afghanistan was one of those things. Like everybody knew that it happened, and it was going on, but it was like in the background type of. Iraq was front and center, you know. Sure. And then that was dying off, you know. Now Afghanistan moves into the front, you know. So yeah, man, it wasn't a huge shot.
Check.
It really wasn't.
Now walk me through this. When I went, I was first boots on deck, so I think that it's going to be a bit different because my Iraq deployment, I wasn't, and it was different there. But when we went in, we staged, we flew in. Now, when you guys come in, are you coming into Leatherneck and then staging somewhere? Or are you coming in? Talk to me about, okay, we know it's Marjah, we're set, and now you're going over. Where do you go to?
So, you know, we did the typical route through Europe and wherever. We stopped in Kyrgyzstan, actually. Initially, that was the first, like, well, yeah, you expect it to be austere because it's a stand, you know,
Yeah,
and
but
then
it's
you
not.
get no, it's like it's a mobile Air Force 5-star fucking hotel with mountains of free candy bars and 24-hour chow halls, and you're like, man, like this is what you
Great.
guys should have joined the fucking Air Force, Jesus.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so we stayed over there briefly, and everybody got their their final Pizza Hut and cups of coffee and whatnot, and then we flew out to Dwyer.
Straight into Dwyer. Okay.
Actually, no. We stopped somewhere else. I'm trying to remember where it was.
We came from the stand to Leatherneck, and then Leatherneck down to Dwyer, I believe, is what we did.
It may have been Leatherneck. I didn't really do anything. I didn't go anywhere. It was like a small city. They had like a TGI Fridays and stuff. I know some of the other guys went there because we had a couple hours layover. I just went to sleep.
Oh, okay.
So, that
definitely not Leatherneck then.
Yeah. But yeah, then we ended up in Dwyer, and that's where we first couple of weeks for our acclimation period and all that
Sure.
to get all of our. And then from there, it was on the helos, and it was out where we were gonna go. So
check.
Yep.
Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. You guys are going to come into Dwyer, and you're going to stage for a bit. And at some point, the rip toe is going to start with 1-6, who's south of me. And south of me, you have 1-6 operate in southern Marjah. 3-6 was operating in northern Marjah. You guys are going to come in and take 1-6 and rip them out. 2-9 is going to come down and rip us out. And just going to talk a little bit through the way I remember it, and then I want you to kind of fill me in a little bit on how it went, or if the way that I remember it is not accurate. But we were still operating, and like I said in the monologue, well, I'm out at a OP, picketing an MSR to make sure that they don't backfill us. They were backfilling IEDs down 608 and 605 the whole time we were there. And so I'm out there. The command element shows up in trucks. They're bringing water and chow and whatnot. And they're like, hey, just you guys need to stay frosty. This fight ain't over. And I know you know that, but we're just saying it. And we're like, yeah, definitely. Like, we know that. Like, they're crawling everywhere. They're like, no, two squad leaders came in from 2-6 to rip out 1-6, and they're not with us anymore. And we were like, oh, like just such a punch to the gut. And it's like, how does this happen? Like, how? Not like I understand how, but I just couldn't imagine being what, in this case, you, who's got to find that out and then assume command, and you haven't even got to the battlefield yet. And that to me always boggled my mind. And even in talks and speeches that I've talked about that very thing, which is crazy that we meet up, this far after the fact and talk about it now, which is amazing. Walk me through your side of that.
So, all right. So Zach went ahead on the advance party. Like you said, he went ahead with, it's standard practice, several squad leaders, the company commander, a few other people, the tactical leadership, or at least a piece of that from every unit, is what goes forward to kind of ascertain more situational awareness. That way, it's, in theory at least, it's easier for a unit to come in if at least the leadership knows what's going on and they can kind of prep people for it.
Sure.
Okay. I'm not sure how a normal RIP's supposed to go in a combat zone, because this is the only combat deployment that I had. And, as you just mentioned, it did not go as planned, and it did not go as practiced. So the 8th of June in 2010, Zach's been over there for several weeks now. We're getting ready to leave, like, I think 5 days later or so. We're all headed out. And I'm taking my boots over to admin to go get some last minute BS squared away. And everybody's just at this point, like, we've done all the training that we're going to do. We're just trying to get everything administratively squared away so we can go home and spend a little bit of time with our families before we leave. That's kind of everybody's focus right now.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And great about it too. We had a couple of days where, you came in, you got things done, and then you were out by like noon or something. Like, hey, go home, go see your families. So it's early morning sometime on the 8th, and taking these guys out to my truck, and I hear this voice. It's our company first sergeant, Eric Kaysen, and he calls out to us like, "Hey, where the fuck are you guys going?" Morning first sergeant, I'm taking my guys over to Abbott. "No, you're not. Get the fuck over there to Gazebo right now. Call all your boys. Get everybody here." Okay, I first sergeant. We go over there and all that. We had guys to the winds doing all sorts of shit. I had one guy that was a chaser. My second team leader was a chaser at the time. Had a dude in a fucking orange jumpsuit, like there at the meeting, yes. Right? Like everybody from fucking everywhere. Like dudes were coming in that were at home. And it took a few hours to get everybody on deck. But once we did, so first sergeant brings everybody in. There's no formal setting or anything like that. It's just everybody get close. And there's a chaplain standing behind him and a whole bunch of high-level officers that I've never fucking seen before. Like this is
so hold on. You're still in the States.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. I just had to clear that up for myself. You're not even in the country yet. You're in the United States. Okay.
Yep. So we're at the where 6 Marines area is, across from PT Road, there's that gazebo.
Yep.
Down parking lot. That's where we're at, in front of that gazebo. And first sergeant brings us all in, and he's like, "Hey guys, there's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to say it. We got word that Sergeant Walters and Sergeant Chanfield were killed, and he kept going. He kept talking. I don't remember anything that he said after that. Like it's like that white noise, like you hear that,
yeah,
and everything else just kind of gets tuned out. Like my platoon sergeant's standing like right behind me, and I'm like, oh shit. All you guys knew about this before we did, like, and it's all kind of starting to come together, but that initial shock, the only thing that's going on right now with me, like, that's it, And I did an interview a while back with a 30-year infantry Marine named Brad Washabaugh not too long ago, and in that, I kind of say the same thing that I'll go over here. Like, you never expect it to be like the number one badass in the unit. You think about, like it could be one of your buddies or something like that. You think about yourself, definitely, in all the ways that you could die or you could get fucked up. Like it's only natural going into that environment to wonder how you're going to react, what it's going to be like. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way that it is. The human mind is going to wonder about those things naturally.
Sure.
And you always wonder how it's going to happen or, what you're going to be like, but nobody ever thinks it's going to be the number one dude, and that was, after that, they just kind of left us for a little bit. They kept everybody there in that area. And they told us, obviously, stay off your fucking phones. Like if anybody saw a phone, they were losing their shit. Families had to be notified properly. And, nobody wants to find out that somebody's been killed on fucking Facebook. That's right. A terrible way to somebody's been killed. So, after that initial shock, man, what really, the next thing that set in was just this searing fucking anger, and not like a livid, highly active anger, but more of a just like a deep, like burning, searing sort of fucking anger. I wanted to torch the entire country of fucking Afghanistan and just not give a fuck about how they felt about it or their way of life or their culture or their religion or anything. I didn't give a shit, in that moment. In that moment. All right. And I'll stress, this is just me. All right. Like not everybody that was there that got that news felt the same way. All right. And we certainly didn't act on those emotions that I was feeling in that way when we went over there. But in that moment, okay, as a young team leader, having never experienced combat before and having my mentor killed when I wasn't there to do anything about it either.
That's that pain right there. That's that pain that you can't do anything. It's like, it's almost like, like a dude that takes his own life, and you're not there to stop him. You never got the phone call, and you're just angry. You're just mad. And this is even worse because this is the enemy taking him. I understand. I understand that. And you say they knew before you guys. Are you saying that your platoon sergeant and such?
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Because like right after they said something, like I realized like he's standing like right behind me.
And does the weight set into you, that you're going to take this squad initially?
It definitely crossed my mind. Yes, because and that was another thing too. Like looking back on it, one of those things, these things that you're doing that you don't realize how they're going to benefit you later on. Mm-hmm. Succession command, that process to which we know who's going to take over when somebody gets hit and on down the line, like that was pre-built into everything that we did. Yeah. Exactly. Throughout the entire workup. And there were a few times when he removed himself from the situation and put me in charge just to see how I would react.
Sure.
And we have one major exercise, I think it was like a battalion fetch or something, where he had to go back to the rear and do something with his extension package because he extended to come on this deployment with us. So I had to have the squad for that day. And he did it with other team leaders too. It wasn't just me, but it was a theme throughout the entirety of our workup together. That whole 10-month period, it was in every order that he briefed. We talked about it all the time. We war gamed about it all the time. We did it in small scenarios that we set up as a squad. But it was more so of the, hey, this is a developmental thing. We want to prepare you for leadership roles and stuff. Like I said,
sure.
No one expects that it's actually going to be that dude, the number one badass. And when you're preparing for it mentally, you always picture yourself being there when it happens, when somebody gets. You never prepare yourself, or at least I didn't anyway, for being on your way to admin one day and finding out that one of your guys got smoked.
Yeah. Now, did they tell you how it happened when they told you? Or did they just tell you that he got hit and he went down?
So the only information that we received was that it was an IED.
Okay.
And we found out that it was the same IED that took him and another squad leader, Sergeant Derek Shanfield, who he was in 3rd Platoon. And so I knew of him. I had interacted with him very little. I did not know him personally. That's why I don't speak about him a whole lot. I think that would kind of be wrong in me to act as if I was really good friends with him when I wasn't.
Sure.
The impression that he left, though, on his platoon was very evident in the wake of his death. Though he was another very, very good leader, as I understand it. And his guys valued him a lot. So it was hard on 3rd Platoon as well. But
sure. Now, I know that one of the, and I don't know much, I only know a little bit of what, I heard plus what was going on, in our AO, and I know that they were just south, but one of the things that the enemy had started to do at that time, because, they'd been watching us for however many months, was they would set IEDs in like the entryways to buildings. And then as we would come patrol past that, they knew we would suck to cover to fight them. So they would, shoot that initial burst or whatever at us, and then watch the Marines suck to the, to the cover and pop to the roofs and things of that nature. And, if that was a tactic used and multiple Marines were trying to get into cover or into a building, that could have been bad. And, and I didn't hear the story. I just heard that they were taken down, by an ID. But that the Taliban were absolutely crafty in the area and doing things around that time that, they didn't care about the civilian population, which makes it hard for us. Because you would assume people be living in these buildings and not letting bombs be put in their, in their doorways. And at the time, it just wasn't the case. They ruled with an iron fist, and those people were damned one way or another. So, and that's tough. And you're still in the United States. Your main effort's still there, which is wild. And so you get to take that long plane flight over knowing this, and your whole platoon knowing this. I want to know, at what point did you talk to the squad about this? Like when cooler minds prevailed, I'm sure, but like how did that go?
So there was a big rigmarole of personnel shifts that took place in this time period. It's very chaotic, all right? So initially they were going to bring in another sergeant who was on his way out of the Marine Corps at the time. Okay. The second that he found out that Sergeant Shanfield and Sergeant Walters were killed, he was like, nope, not getting out. I want to go on this deployment. So our battalion sergeant major moved heaven and earth in order to get that package pushed through. So my platoon commander pulled me off to the side and let me know, like, hey, you're his APL. You've been in this position for a long time, and I know that you're expecting to take over the squad, but we want someone with a little bit more experience right now. It's not personal. It's just business, and we need every edge that we can get. No offense. I was like, okay, yeah. It makes sense. I'm fucking pissed about it because, like I said, that was what I had trained for,
Check, yep. And so it's somebody new coming into y'all's squad right before, a big deal, so...
Right. And fortunately, I knew of him. He was in 1st Platoon on the MEU, so I knew of him. Hadn't really interacted with him a whole lot, but I knew his reputation, and his reputation was more of he was like a modern-day crusader type. He's a devout Christian man, hard as nails, really big BJJ guy. That's where he spent his off time when we were out in the field, going and slaying himself at a BJJ gym. Yeah. It was definitely hardcore. Had a reputation for being proficient as well. And... so I kind of got it. I understood, like, okay. Mm-hmm. No. So I pulled the squad up to one of the lounges, and I let him know what was going on. And then he came in and he addressed the squad. He was very professional about it. And one of the first things he said was, hey, I respected Sergeant Walters. I didn't know him like you guys did. I'm not here to change everything that you guys have done up to this point. I'm going to find a way to integrate into what you do. So that kind of made us feel a little bit more comfortable, at least me. And then we went to Dover to receive Zach and Derek's remains, and we met Zach's family and saw a very different side of the Marine Corps. And that was a very, very, very sobering experience. He was this larger than life figure, a mentor to all of us, left an incredible impression on us. And we saw his remains in a box about this big. Now, whether that was actually his remains or just whatever they found of his personal effects, I don't know. But to see it reduced to that and know that it happened in a flash, and actually years later, in the manner that you spoke about with the Taliban tactics, we didn't know that at the time, but we can get into that later. There was question marks as to how it went down, So we get.
I don't know. I was all out of assumption, man. You know how word works over there. I have no clue, right. and I'm interested to talk. We can get into it, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, we still had all those questions at this time. None of us knew exactly how it happened. We just knew it was an IED. The same blast took both of them, and that was it. So okay, time to push forward. Much, motherfucker. Yeah. And we get over to Dwyer. Sergeant Lutz, that squad leader was supposed to be taking over for Zach, had to stay back. And so I just kind of stayed in as an interim squad leader type dude. We got our brief from the company commander, and RAO was massive. Too big for 3 squads to cover because we had to man the post. At our outpost, we had to have a QRF force, quick reaction force, ready to go. We also had to have a patrolling effort as well. So that was going to be rough for 7 months straight, given that there was still a lot of kinetic combat going on in the AO at the time, and they made the decision that we needed 4 squads. Okay, so what happened is I would retain the squad that we had been the entire time. And each of us, so there were 3 squads, right? Each of us would give 1 fire team, okay, plus some Marines from our weapons platoon as well to form that 4th squad. Mm-hmm. Um, the team that I had trained the entire time was the team that we elected to send over. And as much as I hated it at the time, it made the most sense. It did. Those two Marines stayed together, and they went over to Sergeant Lutz, and then we became fourth squad. But I kept the same team leaders that I had worked with, and 75% of the Marines that had been in our squad for that entire 10-month workup, and that's how that actually went down. And all that happened in Camp Dwyer. So by the time we were boarding the helos to actually land in Marjah and assume combat operations, it was all in place. So
check. Now, give me an idea of the squad's mentality. Your squad that you assume, what is their mentality? I know you're savage, mad, ready to go make somebody kill, pay for this buddy that they killed, and this leader and this mentor. Are they very much on the same page?
Yes, but I think to an extent to where they're a little bit more conscious of emotional control about the process. And we had our second team leader, or who would become our second team leader at the time, Corporal Smith. He actually gave voice to that in the moments after we found out Sergeant Walters was killed. About that time that my shock gave way to my anger, he actually spoke up to the squad and told them, hey, Sergeant Walters would not want us to lose control and to essentially do things that would bring dishonor to ourselves or to the Marine Corps or to his memory at all. He gave voice. I was not at a place emotionally where I was going to do that. Even if I had thought about it, I wouldn't have given voice to it. Such was my anger at the time.
Yeah, that's good foresight on that corporal's part.
It is. And looking back on it and looking back on, the deployment and how it played out, it just kind of brings to mind to me the difference between myself and the other team leaders. So instead of having a normal TO squad with 3 team leaders and, an RTO and all that, we broke it into 2 teams, team 1, team 2, and that's how we operated, somewhat independently of each other when we were outside the wire, but like a mutual support kind of concept. Sure. And we have one team leader, Lance Corporal Turnipseed, and he was just kind of all about the experience. He was a lot more scholarly than I was. He and Zach built their bond, both being security forces Marines from Fast Company, and they looked to other campaigns and other militaries to kind of bring tactics in to what we did. A lot from the Rhodesian Salute Scouts and things like that. Corporal Smith, the Marine that had, brought up the issue about not slaughtering everything that we see, he legitimately wanted to help people, I believe. He cared about that aspect of the deployment, more of the protection aspect, the nation building aspect, those types of things.
Sure.
And Seeds valued the experience. This was a part of living life to the fullest for him, and I wanted to be the next Achilles. A lofty goal for sure, but a highly unrealistic goal. All right. Which is also something that I was too arrogant and too proud to admit to myself at the time.
Yeah.
And this just kind of like fueled that fire for me. So, and those differences between us 3 and my lack of emotional intelligence would build some walls throughout the course of this deployment. When you have things like that, those types of interpersonal issues, it brings to light how intricate this whole thing is. It's not just a bunch of dumb grunts, dragging their knuckles around and destroying stuff. It is a highly personal experience to exist in this culture. Okay. And it requires a lot of emotional intelligence for a squad leader, which is something that I had been confronted with before at all. Being just the blunt instrument type of leader that I was, if you can call it a leader, quote unquote. I was the scream and yell kind of sledgehammer type, didn't get me very far when when the rounds actually started, going two ways. But yeah, man, it humbled me a lot, realizing that that's not the way that you have to go about it. And their mentality, I think because me and Zach were so different, that affected everyone in the squad.
Sure.
So it brought to light to me how important the relationship between squad leaders and team leaders are, and how that relationship will filter down to everybody else. The kids know when that are fighting, just the way that it is.
Yep.
Right. And several times throughout the deployment, I was presented with that fact, and I just said, fuck it. Nope. I'm here. I've made my decision. This is who I am as a leader. This is how I'm going to go forward. So I was really stubborn. I was really good at just powering through something, not so good at taking a step back and realizing, hey, this is a very different role, and I'm just, for the benefit of the squad.
Yeah, that's part of the, the big psychology I wanted to talk about. I never did that. I never assumed through succession, and thank God. And I don't think a lot of people do. There's not a lot of people that have done that. And the reason I say that is, like, I took my first squad as a corporal. I was young. I was borderline too young, inexperienced. And I had to learn with that squad that how I was doing it was not the right way. Like, I had to learn that through a squad. And I hate that squad had to, have a not 100% me, but it wasn't a 100% me. It wasn't what I would become, because I needed to almost experience things with them to understand that I was too arrogant or prideful or, whatever you want to call it, savage, to do it correctly. I had to realize that, that's just, I tried that way. I tried it for a couple of months and it weren't the way. That's just not the way to go. And so you're having in this situation to figure that out on a deployment where it matters. And that's different. And all the while recovering from an emotional gutting of losing your mentor that you thought would be there to show you this kind of stuff when the rounds are going both ways. And so that's just, that's what I wanted to talk about in that core. You've already covered it, but I mean, you're still recovering from this stuff and having to see, oh, this isn't the way. Like, there's a reason he did things the way he did them, or they, whoever you want to look at.
Right. And that was, a lot of that became glaringly true in the latter part of the deployment. The beginning part of it, we were, so we got separated from the company when we first got on deck, and we went down, we were attached to a weapons company, a little bit south of everybody else at a place called Cotneria.
Okay.
And so our first couple of months were kind of alone, not alone technically, but we were away from the rest of the company. And so first off, from an emotional standpoint, dealing with Zach's loss, that didn't really happen. Okay. And I just kind of stuffed it down and said, okay, I'll deal with it when I get back home.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. You're here at this point. There's only so much that you can control. If it's your time, it's your time.
Yeah.
But I didn't confront that the way that I should have. And so I had that in the background, kind of like gnawing and just eating away a little bit. I didn't realize that's what was going on, but looking back on it now, that definitely played a factor in how I carried myself and how I interacted with the squad.
Mm-hmm.
And then those differences with the team leaders as well. The first thing that really jumped out to me was how well Zach understood everybody. And I hashed on this before. I didn't realize it until I was in his shoes.
Yeah.
That in itself was a monumental task. I compare it like this, and this is what I tell my kids when they ask about it and stuff. Zach wore a size 15 boot. I wear a size 9, and I had to fill that out. And it just wasn't going to happen. I had other people tell me, like, hey, you're going to have to figure out your own way to do this. Don't try and be Zach. And I was like, oh, yeah, man, for sure. Absolutely. But I didn't actually do that. I just stayed being me and tried to force that. And it, like, we got through, but it could have been a whole lot better, and I could have had a whole lot more favorable impact on those Marines had I adjusted. The first, God, I say 3 months or so, we were down at Naria, and it was kinetic. You know, every squad that left the wire was going to get into a firefight.
Mm-hmm.
You knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, brief pop shots from, you know, a random farmer that got paid or intimidated into picking up a rifle. And then, you know, more often than not, it was a sustained firefight from anywhere from like 3 to 6 or 7 hours.
Right.
You know, you'd get into it, and then it would last all day. QRF was getting up regularly. The FOB, or the cop, excuse me, was taking contact as well at random points throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you know, in danger of being overrun or anything, but more just probing. You know, they wanted to gauge our reactions and stuff.
Yep.
And that's another thing that this whole, so in the background, I've got the emotional trauma of dealing with Zach's loss, trying to settle into a new role with the team leaders and not taking that in stride and not adjusting to it. And then I'm now introduced to the actual chess match that goes on the tactical level between two enemies.
Mm.
It's not like it is when you read a book or when you watch a documentary or when you're doing like that. You know, it's much more intricate than that. Tactics are changing. No situation is exactly the same. And that fluidity, it really tested that creativity that Zach was so keen on. That's why he did what he did. He anticipated this. He saw this. You know, he was also the glue that held the squad together. So all these issues that I'm having, it just appeared that every decision that I made, I would compare myself to Zach and be like, man, he already had all this figured out. Why is it so much more difficult for me to do it? So that was another problem. I was always comparing myself to him instead of just focusing on me being better every single chance that I could get, you know?
Yeah, that's probably that subtle subconscious healing and grieving for him too. I know you said you just didn't do it, but it was there. That's what you're saying. It was there and it came out to people. So, yeah, please continue.
It's just, it's an interesting cocktail, you know, and it's definitely an overload, you know, because you take all those things and then you factor them into everything that's going on with you physically and mentally and spiritually when you're in an active and death situation, and not just once or twice, but it's sustained, you know. So when we weren't, you know, back at the FOB or back at the COP, excuse me, at Naria, you know, we had outposts and stuff that we would go and man. It was kind of seen as like a break, you know, you didn't patrol out of them or anything. You sat on a main MSR and, like you said, made sure that people weren't backfilling IEDs or doing anything shady or anything like that, you know. Well, every now and then your dude up on post would take contact too, you know, in those small scenarios or in those small little enclosures that we had. And so there wasn't really a whole lot of rest or respite from it. And it was just a lot going on, man. You know, talk about like, and this is not a way to garner sympathy or pity at all. Like, you know, like jumping into the fucking deep end with cinder blocks tied around your feet, you know? It happened. We all knew it was a possibility when we signed the contract. So there's no need for sympathy or victimhood here. But when you're actually confronted with that and you realize everything that's going on, it's too much at the moment. I didn't realize any of this. Well, I shouldn't say any of this, but most of it, I didn't realize it was all happening, and I wasn't able to break it down and analyze it like that until I got home 7 months. You know, like at this point when I'm there, I'm just focused on what's directly in front of me. And every now and then something will happen that'll kind of take all these things that are in the background and bring them up to the front a little bit and make me just be like, okay, now it's on. I didn't actually dedicate a whole lot of serious thought to it and critical self-analysis the way that I should have.
Yeah, I think that when you're in the time and you're in the place, that's probably, you know, that's your mind doing a self-defense mechanism. That's saying, yeah, we'll have plenty of time to think about that, Stuart, the rest of our life, but we need to get the rest of these motherfuckers home now. That's what we need to do. We need to go out. We need to kill as many of these bastards as we can kill put them down, and then we need to grab our guys and we need to come home. And that's your mind does that for you. And I think that, we don't have to get too much on a tangent, but a lot of guys that struggle with PTSD now, I think that's what it is. Like, your mind knew that would hurt you. And so it spread load that throughout your brain. So you couldn't collect it or recollect it and bring it all back into one, because your mind knew what that was going to do to you. So it knows right now what you have to do is you have to spread that out, make it unattainable. So if it comes to mind, you're like, but you're not doing deep thought. It's there, but it's not all there. So you don't feel it all. When you get home, you start to recollect that stuff. You start to think about it a little on a more of a deeper level. And I'm not saying all the bad stuff, but the stuff that just shatters when it happens because of so much going on, sensory overload, and you're talking about on the highest level. And so I think that's what a lot of it is. We're not supposed to recollect that at the time. We have a mission. The one cog has been removed, the new cog has been in place, and now we have to churn. And that's right. I think that's right. I too tried to do that. Matthias Hansen died on the 21st of February, about a week in or so to our push. I tried to do the same thing. I had my moment of anger and just pure emotion that came out of me. And then I had my rage where I wanted to kill everybody in that village. Everybody. We even talked about it. We were going to call it an NCO patrol. We were going to go down there and make them pay. And at the end of the day, when cooler minds prevailed a couple hours, later, and we all had this talk, it was like, no, we're not going to murder people. We're going to come here. We're going to do this cleanly with honor, and we're going to take that home for them, and that's what we did. And that's what Marines do. And it's what they'll always do. But just my little jump into that is that I think it's right. I think that stop and churn, because you have all this. You have all this time. You'll figure that out. You figure that part out. Good, bad, or indifferent, you have time to do it where it doesn't impact the lives of your other men. And so I think that's right.
Yeah. And when I say that, it typically elicits some sort of negative response from people. I don't know exactly who it is. I just see the podcast numbers and stuff. But, when I do a poll on whether or not people think it's appropriate for us to feel that way, for us to have that desire for vengeance. It's overwhelmingly like, no, that's not right for you to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand that. I don't.
That's people who have never been confronted with that situation, in my opinion.
Right. Acting on it is one thing, but the emotional response, okay, I think it's perfectly healthy and perfectly normal.
Yeah, I would tell those same people, I would say, if I walked into your house and I shot your little brother in the face right now and peeled him out, would you not want any negative intention or emotion towards me?
Right.
Because that's the bond that we have as Marines, hands down. When you're a squad leader, you're a team leader, those guys that are entrusted to you, it's not entrusted. Their fucking life is entrusted to you, and it's not their choice. And then they look at you as that mentor, that big brother, that father figure damn near. Your squad leaders looked almost like that way. And when you have that, and that's your family, and oh, by the way, there's 42 of you. And when all 42 of you are dead, it's over. Nobody goes home. So every single time you see a U.S. Marine folded up, put in a box and leaves, that's another one of you that you might not have in the fight tomorrow, or that you absolutely will not have in the fight tomorrow. And people that say that that's crazy or that it shouldn't elicit that kind of response, purely to me have never been in that situation. And if you have been in that situation, I would beg you to come on my show so that we could talk about that psychology and the differences there. So I kind of lost our trajectory there, but let's just start with let's start with your first contact as a squad leader when you get in. Let's unfold that, unpack that a little bit, because that's going to be that first proving grounds to your squad, to your team leaders, and then to your subordinate junior Marines looking up saying, did we do it right? Did we do it wrong? Do they have control? So walk me through that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Okay. So endpoints. All right. Okay. So, arguably one of the most significant moments of my life. And I think that's natural for everybody. But the way that this thing played out, you really couldn't have asked for it to go much better. All right. And so we pushed out from Cotnery. It was an early morning patrol, and every other squad had already gone out of this, and they had all taken contact. So we're all like chomping at the bit. I'm hitting up my platoon commander like every day, sometimes multiple times a day, like, hey, when are we going to get our chance? When are we going to get our chance? And so it finally came, and I pulled the squad in. I gave him a brief the day before. And, we bedded down for a bit that night. Very restless sleep, as you can imagine.
Now this is like you got the word that you're going out on patrol, or you're going out on an attack op, or what kind of op are we doing? What kind of mission do we have?
Just a basic patrol up to a local village that's not too far away. I want to say it was maybe, it couldn't have been more than like a few miles away. It was out of the reach of our 240s, and it was out of visible range from the fob, but it wasn't too far away to where if we got in a jam, somebody couldn't be there to help us out,
Check. And you're going out, you're a census, or is this, is this patrol to contact? Is this a census operation? Is this a presence patrol to saturate the area and deny the enemy freedom of movement? You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing?
Right. I forget what the actual tasking was.
You're not going to attack anything. You're going on a patrol.
Designated objective that we're gonna fix and flank or anything like that. No,
okay.
Like over here, we want you to go out there, see if you can find the bad guys, see if the locals know where the bad guys are. So you could call it
contact patrol, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Check.
So we were like, okay, yes, you want us to go talk to locals and stuff? That's cool. Whatever. Our squad leader just got killed. We want to get in a fight. That's what we were all thinking. So we were all the same at this point. All right. And we left out sometime in early morning. I want to say it's around like 7 or 8 or so. Blazing heat like I've never experienced before. And I remember like it was incredibly surreal. So like we line up in the fob. I send my my request permission to depart, and we push out. And we cross over the road in the first wadi, and we get into the first field, which is all tilled, just dry dirt. And then we see the cornfields. And you can see the heat wafting off, kind of like when you open up a grill and you can see the heat coming up. And I remember stepping through that, and it was just like a furnace wall.
Oh yeah.
And even in the middle of that, like we got through the cornfield and it opened up a little bit more, and I could look around and I could see the team that was in front of me and the team that was behind me, and it just hit me that this was actually happening. Like it's not training anymore.
Yeah.
Real. We're finally here after all the shit that we've been through, the years of sacrifice and suffering and development. And we're finally here, and it's not training anymore. The gloves are off and it's time to fucking go.
Fuck
Give
me cold chills, dog.
Right. Like I can't every time I think about that specific moment, it gives me chills all over again, man. But so we had the plan in place before we left. We had scouted the terrain. We had really good maps at the time. And so myself and first team, we turned north and we saw the village. It was like a small, like linear type of village over to our left-hand side, which would have been the west. Yeah, the west. And
just for the sake of our listeners, can you kind of, I think just about everybody knows what a chisel plowed poppy field looks like, but can you speak to the terrain outside of the fields? When you're not in a cornfield and you're not in a poppy field, what does the terrain look like to you?
So it's all linear. So if you were to look at it from like an overhead perspective, it would look like a giant checkerboard, essentially, and the fields alternate, so some of them will be like tilled, crunchy dirt that's about like yay high or so. And then you have the fields that are grown. They have corn. They have, the corn that's like way over your head. And then next one, you'll have the poppy that's about, waist high or something like that, and they alternate. And that's broken up by those checker lines, which are roads that have, like wadis, steep, sometimes very steep 10-foot deep drainage ditches, and sometimes they're a whole lot smaller than that. They're a whole lot shallower. And so it's this up and down if you're in the dry fields, which makes you look like you're a drunk man walking around with all this tactical gear on, and then you like disappear all the way down into a wadi and you come right back up. You cross over a road, hopefully you don't get blown up, and then you go down again, and then it's right back into the fields.
Yep. Check.
Vegetation, trees, not a ridiculous amount, but sparse vegetation lines those roads from time to time.
Yep.
And compounds made out of mud brick that's thousands of years old, and that we were about to find out can withstand everything up to and including a 50 caliber machine gun.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, right. Which is amazing. We have
it
all
is
this
amazing
technology and engineering that just gets destroyed by our stuff, and then we go to a place that's thousands of years old, and it's like, meh, 50 cal, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I shot several law rockets in Marjah, and to no avail, to a big plume. Like I'm shooting a 64 millimeter rocket at you, or two, whatever it is. It's big, and it just little bit, and then they fire right back. Man, you're not joking. All right. So you're moving through the fields, and you're taking it all in. You're for the first time, and I think any squad leader or team leader, probably even regular infantryman, rifleman has done that at some point when they hit out there, and it's like, holy shit, we here, we ain't coming no more. We are right here. Yeah. So that's hitting you. Go from there.
So the plan was there was a wadi that ran parallel to the village that's in a narrow, like north and south facing kind of like strip. All right. So 2 lines of houses with, a road down the middle of it. Right. And there's more fields. So we're moving up through those fields and everything. We see the wadi, and the plan was to set second team or point team in along that wadi because it kind of veered off in an L shape. Right. So they're going to take the corner of that and isolate the village or prevent anything from coming from other directions. Right. Well, second team moves in from north to south and goes into the village and tries to, ascertain any information that they can. All right. Really. So we accomplished the mission that we were out there to do. But what we really wanted to do was kind of bait them into seeing, hey, a smaller unit there. That's a pretty good for 5 Marine scouts, and that's exactly what they did. It worked very well. One of the very few times that I can actually say that about a plan that we came up with,
Hell yeah.
But we set in, and then second team went inside, and not too long after that, there it was. The first enemy machine gun burst ripped right overhead, and from there it was just.
Now, are you in the second team moving up with them, or you set in with the first team on the wadi?
No, I'm set in with the first team in the wadi.
Okay.
Because that's really where I was hoping that the action would come from, And it turned out to be that way, thank God. Looking back on it, if second team had gotten hit inside there and we had to rush into an urban environment, not knowing anything about it, that could have been really messy, especially because back of being killed.
Okay, so I understand it right. As the second team moves up, your team at the wadi takes a burst?
No. So they get into the village.
Okay.
Starting to push south. We're already set in at that apex of the wadi.
Yep.
And that's when we take the burst.
Okay, yep. Okay. Check.
The initial team, we respond back with just overwhelming fuck you fire. It's not like in training where we're assigning rates and everybody's sticking to the book like, oh, okay, my little burst. Like, nope. Everybody's just full bore cyclic fucking rate, destroying everything that they possibly can. All right. Which I think is normal too. Most of the time in that first firefight, just from speaking to other Marines about it, that's everybody's kind of first twitch reaction.
Yep. Go.
So Corporal Smith and his team come out from the village right behind us. We're screening them with our fire, and they set up in the wadi over to my right. Okay, so I'm center. I've got Turnip Seed's team over here, Smith's team over here, and the enemies, they just plop down right in the middle of our now L shape where we have interlock.
Beautiful.
So it turned out really well. Not so much based on skill of my part, but mainly suggestions from my team leaders and the stupidity of the enemy.
Well, that's self-denigrating though, because you're already playing this game of cat and mouse, right? You're already playing this tactical game of chess, not checkers, and you're making deliberate decisions to draw on a 5-man team one way or another, and then you had support from both sides. That makes sense to me, and that's beautiful. So don't denigrate, man. We do that too much as Marines and service members. So
yeah, well, so it played out. It played out very well, and I remember I note the response of the Marines. And there was a few of those like, oh shit, crazy moments, but I don't ever really think that we were in a point where we thought that it was getting out of hand.
Right.
There were calls, some close rounds ripping by, and our corpsman actually, Doc Walker, he was with second team, and so when they came out of the wadi, they had to cross a little bit of, or when they came out of the village, they had to cross a little bit of open ground, right? So as they're running, he takes a round in his rifle, like right above the chamber, right? So we get out of the body and everybody's doing their thing, and we're starting to settle down and dial in a little bit. The cyclic rages died off. People are changing mags as they need to, and we're starting to communicate. One guy saying, hey, I got a target over here, 200 meters. He's behind this stack of hay. He's moving your way or something. It passes into the next guy's lane. Got it. Bam, putting him down, and it just moves down the line. Guys are communicating the way they should be, and they're taking advantage of targets of opportunity.
Beautiful.
Right. I look over at Doc. I'm like, Doc, why aren't you firing, man? And he holds up his right in the chamber. I'm like, holy shit.
Sweet miss.
Yeah. Oh, you got lucky, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And so that went on for, I want to say, a good couple of hours, man. Probably like 2 or 3 or so.
Now, were they continuing to reinforce their enemy element as it was getting, whittled down?
So we didn't know it at the time, but the fire after our initial like fuck you volley went out, it slacked off for a little bit. We had gained fire superiority, and that was very clear. That was like instant clear, okay? But as we started to kind of scale it back a little bit and started thinking about ammo conservation, we were communicating and stuff. Yeah. Yes, they were bringing in fresh elements. It would be later confirmed after the fact, via our air assets that were overhead, that they had a pre-staged Aiden litter team, and they had an initial element that initiated contact, and then they had a reinforcing element that came in. Okay. Their Aiden litter team was working overtime.
Oh, dude, they're no joke. And I would say something about that. I know, when I was there, that same time, a little bit before you, it was a psychological game that I don't think they knew they were playing. Maybe I'm wrong. But the psyops on putting people down, having eyes on a dead enemy next to a weapon, and then getting there and it's gone. I'm talking brass is gone. Their bodies were gone. You could see where they washed blood off. They did not want us to know who we killed, how many we killed, or when we killed them, how we killed. They didn't want us to know anything. And I'll say this, it fucking worked, because I would be enraged getting up to a guy that I knew I put down in an exact position, and it's just wet sand. Maybe a link or two where they missed, police call, because he fought from that position for several bursts. There should be 100 links and rounds there, and there's nothing, right? And the gun is gone. And so anytime we were able to close on them fast enough to get their weapons and their bodies was like a privilege, which didn't happen much because, if your normal engagement's 200 yards to 350 or 400, they have that much time to get their litters in, get those guys, and get them out of there. And that can play hell on friendly elements. It played hell on my squad psychology, killing them, right? So whether that was meant for that reason or if it was just more religious based, get them off the field so we can have our ceremony and it be done, which is what I think it was more of. But if not, they were smart. It was a smart way to go about it.
It was probably a mix of both. I mean, obviously they're a religiously based force, and we all do. Same time, if you look at a lot of their tactics, it's plain to see that at least someone in their hierarchy has studied history in the past. The NVA were notorious for doing the exact same thing in Vietnam. You know, they learned from other insurgent forces and they use some of the same tactics, the same way that we look to other militaries and did the same thing, which adds another layer to that chess match that you're talking.
Absolutely.
And we weren't going to get that satisfaction today either, you know. But, you know, so as it went on and as it progressed, you know, we maneuvered a little bit. We utilized that wadi, and we weren't going to break away from that. Like, it was a defensible position. We had interlocking fields of fire. We knew we were putting them down because guys were talking about it and actually seeing it happen. And why would we abandon that position? We shouldn't, right? Me being a young squad leader, eventually I decided to deviate from that. And thankfully, events played out that kept us from completing that. But so I decided to take Lance Corporal Turnipseed's team, the second team that had initially set in the wadi, and we moved down a little bit. We were just going to hold Smith's team where they were, and we were going to flank around and just try and clean them out completely. I wanted to be walking over dead bodies by the time we were done.
Yep.
And so we started that movement, and then a friendly cat element came up, and we were like, oh, okay, the big guys are here, the big guns are here, maybe we shouldn't do this. And so we pulled back a little bit, and there's a little bit of fiasco trying to mark the ground for air assets that came in. So I sprinted back, I tossed a smoke grenade out there trying to mark our position, and the birds didn't see it, or whatever asset that we had overhead. We were just told ISR. They didn't get it, you know. So we had one of our A&A soldiers at the time. He had this bright baby blue shirt on underneath his, you know, old 1970s style chest rig, and he took that bitch off and started waving it in the air like this.
Hey, dude, whatever works.
Balls of steel, man. I gotta hand it to that guy, you know. But they eventually got our position, and you know, my RTO was lobbing 203 rounds to mark the enemy position, and eventually our cat element was the one that actually dealt with the air assets and got that called in. So instead of us completing that flanking maneuver, we came back, and as a squad bounded back by teams across the open ground to be right up next to the village, just to try and meet our men safe.
Check.
And as I'm moving with that second team, you know, I look over to my right. We're all hauling ass, you know, and this is several hours into it, so we're all smoked at this point.
Oh, yeah.
An ass, and I look over, and that same A&A soldier with the bright baby blue shirt on, he's got his rifle over here like this, just like popping off rounds as he's running. Like, he's not even looking where they're going, man.
Approved Afghani tactic right there. Yeah. The reason I say that, I recorded with the Machine, Nick Lavery, ODA. If you don't know, you need to get on it. This dude, the dude is a machine. Anyway, he got shot in one of his pumps by a guy doing that. He's trying to recover a vehicle that's down and starting to have rounds cook off inside of it, and his guy's in there. His team is in there, and there's this guy. So he starts pursuing this guy, puts one of them down. He said the other guy is running backwards, and he said he was using his thumb, bop, 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 with it over his shoulder, and he takes one. You see, he thought, anyway, we can talk offline about it, but approved Afghani firing tactic there. Field tested is what they say.
Yeah. Luckily, nobody else was behind him except for the bad guys. So that,
right. Thank God. Right.
But we got there, and then, you know, the bird came in, and I'm still drawing a blank as to what platform it was. But I remember being down in the wadi with my guys, you know, and we weren't firing too much at that point.
Yeah.
Several hours into it, but when that thing screeched overhead, and when we saw the munition hit and that explosion, we felt that shock wave from it, man. Like, it was just, I've never felt anything like that before in my life, man. That kind of raw, concussive
power.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it complete assertion of dominance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. I felt the same way the first time I saw HIMARS hit, and we used them in the opening days of Mashtarak. I had a saw gunner shot, and we called in HIMAR rockets, and 2 of them hit a building, and I swore it was like the hand of God. Just reached down through the clouds and made shit go away. And dominance, man. Power and dominance. And I'm sure it sounds like maybe that was a little bit bigger of a munitions if it was dropped by friendly air. So that's an amazing thing. And it's not something like you're happy to experience. You're happy that people are dead that are chasing you, but it's one of those, like you said, just raw power and shock at something that could be dropped so close to you. Let's say that.
Yeah, we were close. I want to say in the vicinity of like, I don't know, probably like 800 meters or so. Like for a munition that big, like you're gonna feel it at that range.
Yeah, man.
You know.
Yeah.
And I could be off a few hundred meters plus or minus on that. You know, granted, this is about 13 years removed.
Right.
You remember it being very close. And there's something to be said about that, though. You know, there's the question that comes up sometimes when you talk to, you know, people that have never experienced this before, and they wonder, or they ask if they have the balls to do so, like, what would make a human being want to go and do this? Like, why? You know, like, is there something wrong with you that makes you want to go and actually kill people? And here's the thing, like, it's the physical act of killing someone that's not what we like relish. You know, what it is it's that pure form of competition. You know, it's not like playing a football game or competing in athletics or something like that. It's that next phase up. It's that universe that is separated because of the consequences and how significant they are. You know, then you factor in this unique culture that's unlike anything that any of us have ever been raised in, has a completely different set of values than the rest of the country. And the developmental effect that has on us. It's caused by hardship and suffering, and the knowledge you gain, the critical knowledge you gain of yourself and of everyone around you, and going on that journey. And then it culminates in that, the most severe form of competition, the validation that comes from that. That is what we relish.
Yeah.
That's what attracted us in the first place.
Yeah. It's that affirmation of doing things correctly in the ultimate arena. That's what it is. And couple that with, 9/11, 2001 cemented a lot of us in the past that we would go and the feelings that we would have. And then it called to us. The war called to me, like from my gut, like, this is what you are here for. This arena that's coming in your life is where you're supposed to be. And it just gnawed and called and gnawed and called. And then what? Then you're there. Then you're in the ultimate arena. And you didn't know who was going to be with you, but you knew somebody would be with you. And you knew a group of guys would be with you. And then you're there. And like you said, you're on that patrol and you're ready to go. And then the enemy wants to take a bite at you. And you get to unleash, all the sacrifices and years of training, and the fact that we had females jump out of the Twin Towers and their last shred of decency holding their skirts down so people wouldn't see them. That's what we fought for. And that's when you get in it, that's what it is right there. It is that competition, but it's also a fuck you. You don't come to the United States of America in any way, shape, or form and us forget about it. We'll be 18 years in, still coming at your door. And somebody else will raise your family because you wanted to come pick this fight. And that changed a lot of thousands of us. I don't know how many, but many thousands of us got called to this place 10 years prior to when we got there, 8 years prior to when we got there, 13, 15 years prior to when we got there. And that calling came out of a day. I'm not saying we wouldn't be there or that I wouldn't have been there without that day, but that day changed a lot of people,
Yeah.
And it called to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that, people ask me that, why would you want to do that? And it's like, man, you're in an arena where if you don't give every ounce of your being to the guy to the left and the right of you, somebody doesn't come home. That's the arena you're in. And then when you succeed and you win the day in that arena, there's no feeling like it. You can't replicate it. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I really don't care what people think about the way I feel about war. If you were there with me, I care about what you think. If you weren't there with me, I could give two shits what you think. But I want to put this there for the young guys that have that calling now. I want them to know, it's an amazing emotion or sensation that can come across there. So, take me to when you walk in from that patrol. So you're gonna enter friendly lines, and there's gonna be something different about every single person that was with you.
Yeah, and it's perfect segue into this, man. It was. I liken it, looking back on it, I liken it to, I imagine this is what like a gladiator would feel coming out of his first match and having, with the rose petals falling down, the crowd's chanting his name, and he has that moment where his trajectory in life is forever altered.
Yep.
He will never be the same ever again. There's a permanent mark left deep inside that's never going to go away. Every man that's been through combat before has that in some way, shape, or form. Now, for me at the time, being quite arrogant, quite egotistical, I kind of held on to it. The rest of the squad was elated as well. We got back and we ground our gear and everything like that. And I went into the COC with my rifle, and the cat team that had been out there supporting us and stuff, they were, their section leader was in there as well, so it was handshakes all around. It was congratulations, like, well fucking done. This is your first combat action as a squad.
Yeah.
And it would be like a 6-hour fucking firefight, which, as they would tell me when we went in there, we were actually outnumbered. There was all in all, there was a full TO squad of the enemy out there, about 12 or 13 cats, including their aid and litter team. We were rolling with 8 plus a corpsman.
Sounds like they were outnumbered.
Yeah. It felt great to hear that, and it also felt great. My platoon commander was like, hey, we didn't go and do the battle damage assessment that we should have because we dropped, munitions. So we should have gone and done a battle damage assessment, but another squad was called out to take care of that. We were done, man. So we got in there and they told us like, hey, you guys were outnumbered. There was about, 12 or 13 cats from what our air assets could see. They saw the aid and litter team pulling away about 8 dudes throughout the course of all of this, so that's pretty high percentage of enemy casualties. And we had 1 heat case. We felt pretty good about that. Boom. And Sergeant Lutz, the guy that was going to take over our squad that, pushed his re-enlistment through, he shook my hand afterwards and he told the whole squad, he was like, you guys can go home and tell Sergeant Walter's family that you fucking got him now. Like, good fucking job, from a dude that's been on multiple combat deployments to say that to us and to have this level of validation in it was priceless.
Yeah.
And there's no other feeling like it, man. That feeling of true achievement in this arena. It was unlike anything else that I've experienced,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fact. You can't replicate it. I've spent like the last 13 years trying to, and you can't. You can't. I jumped out of planes. Can't. You're not supposed to, man. I don't think you're supposed to. I think it's such a grave. I've said this before, but I'll say it again because I believe in it. If we get to the point where everybody comes home from combat and it's not changed and everything's just fine and, we go about our days, then we've lost this whole thing anyway. If we can just go over there and decimate people, not struggle from it, not come home and think about it, not come home and wonder, then we lose already. But our services have a very distinct way of keeping our honor clean. And And that's something that everybody should be proud of that does it right. 100%.
Absolutely. You know, and I don't think that there has to be, and you know, I did not stop along the way to scoop up a medical degree. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about PTSD or anything like that, but I do think that there's a good number of us that come home from combat and we don't have PTSD. I don't think there's anything wrong with admitting that either. You know,
No, I don't either.
Question from that, why would you want to do this? You know, and then it kind of bleeds into, like, there's an expectation that we have to feel sorry for ourselves or be broken just because we took life. Not the case at all. It doesn't mean that we're psychopaths and that we enjoyed that. Okay. But it also doesn't mean that we should be expected to be victims.
Right. Yep. I totally agree.
Drafted. I mean, it's not like we were forced against our will to do this. We all chose willingly.
Fact.
Right? Victimhood will kill faster, or it will kill slower, but more effectively than any weapon of war.
Fact. And I think that's what we're looking at with our country, not to get political, but we're looking at a country who's victimized themselves over the last decade, maybe decade plus, and we've gotten to a point where that's what's expected. Oh, we got to feel bad, or, oh, so sorry you've been hurt. And it's like, no, dude, when I said best job I ever had, I literally meant best job I ever fucking had. Best emotions I've ever fucking had in my life were at war with boys my age. Taking a fight to an enemy for people that we'll never meet and that we'll never even seek admiration from. That's just what we did. We did that for us.
Yeah.
And it will change you. And I think changes most of us for the better. Some of us not. And I'm not afraid to say when I came home, I had trouble, man. I struggled. I struggled drinking. End up in a puddle of tears thinking about some of my dudes. I had these emotions that I just couldn't control. Anger and rage and I'm not convinced that's PTSD, guys. It is, maybe in some part, but I think there's a lot more tied to our brains and with explosions to our brains and shock waves that hit our brains that mess our chemicals and our hormones and our emotional decision making. I think a lot of that comes from shock to the brain and waves to the brain and things of that nature. But if you're one of those guys that struggles, there's no shame in saying that either. You struggle, cool. We get through it together. You didn't struggle, outstanding. Let's use you as a test bed to show these other guys that that's right too. You know, there's no wrong. I don't pity anybody on either side. I just say it's something we got to do. I struggled for a couple of years. I started talking about it. I started having my show, having these cathartic interviews, writing the book and putting it down. And it was help for me. You know, that didn't take away the rage all the way. It didn't take away some of the things that I deal with, but it 100% helped. And, after a period of years of doing these things, you could start to put things in order. You can start to, move past whatever it is that's hanging you up or sticking you up. And if you don't have trouble, outstanding. Do what Stuart's doing and pass the knowledge, pass the word to the next war fighters that, hey, don't make yourself a victim. I don't give a shit what the country's going through or what culture has hit the American waves. When the guys were going through Fallujah, it said the Marines are at war. America's at the mall. Don't worry about what America has to say about you. Worry about the warrior that beat your chest and say, I went and did that fucking right. And now I'm back. And now I get to reap the benefits of being back with my family and living a full life. Not second guessing or disregarding what happened over here. Not trying to pick that apart, but try to show people, hey, this is what you have. This is what we have coming, and we can be better at it together, but we got to get it out there. And that's what I love about what you're doing. I think we could kind of talk about the rest of your deployment day by day and take it as it goes, but I want to kind of move forward. You have a book that's under DOD review right now. And I'd like you just a quick little note about the book, what's to come from the book, what we can expect once it's out of review and gets to the stores. Tell me what it's about.
So the I started working on this early 2017. After I got out, I EAS'd in 2016, so just shy of a decade or so. And as I was writing it, it was kind of like you said, and that victimhood trap. I fell into that, actually, believe it or not. So at the time, I'm just out of the infantry, which is a completely indifferent culture, as we've mentioned several times. Struggling to kind of figure out what my purpose is now, beyond being a husband and a father. My wife had just given birth to our second child. And I was working I wouldn't say a cushy, but a corporate job. It was a good job, but it wasn't really anything more than, this was my first confrontation with working a job for the sole purpose of paying the bills without a form of actual personal gratification for it or development for it.
Sure.
I was trading for dollars, and that's it, So there's a whole lot going on, and a lot of the unhealthy coping mechanisms that I had established in the Marine Corps, alcohol being chief among them, exacerbated because of my failure to deal with my emotions. Now, after Marjah, I had realized that it was glaringly obvious to me the level of emotional intelligence and emotional control and interpersonal communication that was required to be a successful squad leader. So as rough as that deployment was on those fronts, that's what I took away from it, and I made it a point to completely reinvent who I was as a man and as a squad leader moving forward, and that really, again, that was another trajectory altering decision as I moved through the rest of my career. So as I exit the service, I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of the way that I left because I didn't drop my pack. Still went on field ops. I still did everything I could to pull the squad leaders that had no combat experience and spend time with them and pour into them and teach them, and there's other things too that we can get into that I was proud of that I did during that time. But in the aftermath of it all, writing is what helped me not necessarily heal from it, but at least take something that was so jumbled up and chaotic on the inside and map it out from start to finish.
Make something of it. Yep.
Oh, okay. Like once I actually laid everything out and then I saw the emotion that was put into it, the bitterness that was put into it, in part because of the reasons that I got out of the service, it really did kind of help me start moving forward. And then the decision eventually came to, I think that it would actually help if other people could see this, if other people could read this and they could understand a little bit more, because Hollywood, the media, our politicians, our service heads, recruiting campaigns, they're not painting an accurate picture at all. And barring actually serving yourself, that's the next best thing. If you want to understand something, find somebody that's actually had the experience and ask the hard questions that need to be asked. So that's kind of what it started out as. And then as I moved through other jobs and whatnot, I did some time contracting over in Kabul before things ended disastrously over there. And that's how I finished my first draft of it. So it was more of a full circle kind of deal. And in the book, which is entitled Savages, I don't focus too much on, the typical flow of things. There's a little brief period about boot camp, a little brief period about SOI, and then 75% of it is observing this culture and the specific values that make it different, and observing that from my perspective, but in the form of the leadership that I had. Men like Zach Walters and the impact that they had on us. Okay. Establishing that culture. I've read a lot of really good books about the and
Excuse me.
Like David Hackler, one of my favorites. And there's others out there as well, but I haven't read anything where somebody straight up says, these are the infantry values. So that's what I did. I defined those values. And I said, this is why it's different right here from my perspective. Now, perspectives vary and experiences vary, but I think if we can understand this collectively, then it can kind of start to answer a little bit more of that why. You know, what's the bug that makes somebody want this, right? Well, the values. And you see how vastly different it is than American society. You see how different that it is than the rest of the services. Like, okay, I get that a little bit now. Even if I don't like it, I kind of understand.
Sure.
You know, hope that understanding that will lead to a better consensus on what I believe that our legacy as a fighting generation should be, because it's not nation building. It's not protection. We're not robots either. Okay. We're savages, plain and simple. And I define those clearly. And I hope that that's what it accomplishes. I hope that we, in our time, with all of these tools that we have available that no other generation before us has had, we get to define how we're remembered. Not to say that we're better than anybody else, but just to identify our unique character and our very small part in our country's history.
Right on, man. Well, fuck, you make me want to go buy it right now. We need the DOD to hurry up and do whatever review they're doing so we can get this knowledge out. That's the way I feel about it. Oh, yeah. Well, look, man, it's been... Shit, we're over 2 hours. We've had a great conversation, and I look forward to bringing you back in. We'll reconvene again. There's much more that I'd like to pick out of that Marjah deployment, and then again I'd like to touch on the book when it's ready. So definitely something for the viewers. I will be having Stuart Blackwell back. Hopefully in short notice, get him back out there to you guys and get this book out there to you guys. Before we end, why don't you touch a little bit on your podcast, tell people where they can find it, what it's about, what it shows, what it talks about, and then we'll wrap it from there.
Okay, so the Warrior Legacy podcast, available on Apple and Spotify. This is where I haven't gotten into the interview phase yet, but it's taken a lot of concepts from the book, and it's putting those out there and explaining them the best that I can in a manner that I hope everybody can understand. You know, I do my best to relate it to situations that all of us kind of confront on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot about fatherhood in it. You know, it follows from that time being a young infantryman full of piss and vinegar and fire to now where I'm at as a father, and seeing changes with the seasons of life and how I have taken those lessons and applied them to who I am today.
Yes.
I was not the man that I was when I got out of the Marine Corps. Eventually, I hit a point in my life to where I realized that if I kept drinking and kept feeling sorry for myself, it was going to cause irreparable damage to my children.
Yep.
My wife probably wouldn't have stayed with me, and looking back on it, I can't blame her. There was nothing violent or abusive about my behavior, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't detrimental.
Sure.
You know, talk about setting the example for a household. All right. And on top of that, my wife was with me for every single deployment that I went on. I was gone for the first 60% of our marriage, 60% of that 10 years. And she stuck it out with me, you know? So eventually I hit the wake up call, and that's when I started getting my life right. Got back in the gym, started getting back in shape, and I started living for purpose instead of for pleasure. And when this book actually started to come to fruition, and I actually got signed with a publisher, Tactical 16, by the way, they put out a lot of veteran-friendly books.
Shout out.
Yeah, I would definitely check those guys out if you're looking to get something published. That's when I had to figure out a way to get this message out, because I believe in the message. Okay. Any gain that comes from the work is of secondary importance to me, but I believe in the message, and I know that people can benefit from it. And the podcast is a way to bridge that message into everyday life as best as I can, as a husband, as a father, and as someone that is progressing through the different phases as a man.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I've already checked it out, guys. I'm caught up. Warrior Legacy podcast, or is it it's Warrior Legacy, right? Warrior Legacy podcast, guys. Check it out. Stuart Blackwell, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to our next chat, brother.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me here. This has been a great experience, brother. If you're a vet, find this guy, all right? You have a responsibility to tell your story. Look him up. And choices, not chances, all right?
Hey, I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. All right, guys, until next time. Hey, just listen. If you took anything out of this, you took anything away, something that made your heart throb, something that you know needs to go out to the community, put it out, man. Hit that share button. Follow Stuart's podcast. Hit that share button. Let the people know. The people that want to know need to know. And we don't want to keep that from them. So until next time, guys, choices, not chances.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.